introduce. He's tuning in from all the way over he is in San Diego, but he's in a hotel somewhere not too far away from it. He'll remind me again in a minute. It's Andrew Fitzgerald, really, really inspiring individual, I suppose. I read his book. If you haven't read it, I'll put the link underneath to get it on Amazon or any of those places to get your books. It's really, really good. How did I get here? I read the book, and we're just going to delve into what the book is all about today with Andrew, and a little bit about his journey, because Andrew's had a lot of ups, a lot of downs, a lot of forwards and a lot of backwards, to lead him to where he is today, living over across the waters in the States with his wife and his son. So, Andrew, thanks so much for joining me. Can you refresh my memory where you said Silicon Valley? Don't know if you said the location, you might have said it.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me on, Louise. Looking forward to our conversation. Yeah, so I do live in San Diego for the last 12 years, from Cork originally. And today I'm in San Jose, which is in Silicon Valley in Northern California, as I'm visiting one of a very good customer of mine later today. But delighted to chat with you and see where our conversation goes.
Thanks so much, Andrew. So the book, Traveling the Road to Resilience, really, really interesting. And when I was reading it, I did mark down certain pieces of it, because as an Irish person reading it, and we'll all take different things away from it, I just found it so interesting. I'm just gonna read out. Now, you have to buy the book, so you won't get me reading all the book to everyone here today, okay? Just an FYI. But I'm just going to read a little portion here, and I'm going to do that throughout the book, or just pick up little bits that stood out to me. Immigration in Ireland is and always has been seen as they had to go, and there's nothing for them in Ireland, which wasn't what I was doing. I was choosing to change my life, to follow an ambition. I didn't feel I had to explain why I was doing it. Truly, no economic, family, or social circumstance was making me do it. And I read that little snippet before we go into the other parts of the book, because I think most people in Ireland have heard that. You must be leaving because there's something wrong. What's wrong with you? What's wrong? What can we do to fix it to make you stay? And it's just really interesting. And from a personal perspective, I can relate to this as well. I didn't move that far away. I stayed on the island of Ireland, but I remember leaving Galway, and it was kind of like, well, what would you be leaving Galway for? And I'm kind of going for career opportunities, because I couldn't get them in Galway, for the sector I was in. It just wasn't there, and I wanted to grow and I wanted to move up the ladder, and that's why I relocated. But there's nothing wrong. Sure, aren't you grand staying in the job you've in? You've a house and everything. Sure, why would you go? You've no one to support you. So I just loved reading that. And it's really interesting, Andrew, because in your book, a lot of what you talk about around, having that mindset, I suppose the negative self-talk, that we don't realize we're kind of conditioned to doing. And I think you moving over to the States, and I think you mentioned it, everything was awesome. That song, Everything is Awesome, made me really rethink back to this, because when I read this little scripture, this little paragraph, it really, I suppose, goes back to, well, why do we think that way? Why do we think there's something wrong in order for us to change? Because this is really about change, So you want to change, you want to move somewhere else. But as an Irish person, we immediately go, well, why do you want to change? There must be something wrong. And I think you touch on that a lot in the book, and it really hones. When I listened to all the little bits, it came back to that kind of mindset thing that you had, that when things weren't working out, Andrew, like that paragraph, I shouldn't have done it. I shouldn't have made the change. I should have moved back. Talk to me about that, because, you talk in the book how and I've so much to talk about. I could probably be here all day, so I'm going to try and keep it short. You went to therapy, you found how to communicate a little bit more with your wife and things that were going on. But that whole change piece that you talk about at the beginning of the book, what have you noticed now, reflecting back on thinking about what I just read there, that there must be something wrong to move, and how that might have stayed with you? And then you talked about going through customs in the airport, and they were watching this thing on the telly, and it must have been a fail Mary, and it was really, really funny reading it, because I'd be going looking for those negative signs to
Yes.
literally, to go, actually, I'm validating that inner critic voice that's going on, that's telling me everything isn't going to work out. So how did you go about silencing it?
Yeah, I think first of all, nicely synopsized and summed up, and that's a good one to pick on. Definitely, we culturally, we grew up in smaller communities in Ireland. It's a small country, so we tend to be very deep and deep rooted, cousins, aunts, uncles, friends, the pub Friday night, GA, rugby, soccer, which is fantastic. I mean, I have to say Ireland is much more personable than America, but I guess America is probably a little bit more, leans to more positive, and what if we try something different? So I guess, I place too much importance on other people's opinions rather than being true to myself. And, what's right for me is not always right for other people. And as I look back now, that's exactly how I live my life. This is the right thing for me. And, I don't go around judging people, as best I can, of course. We all have opinions. But I guess, I did have to go and get some help. And you mentioned it. Like a therapist, counselor, Valerie, she was a great lady. She got me to look at things totally different. So cognitive behavioral therapy, look at my situation differently, reframe things. And then one thing she always stuck with me was, you're very resilient. And I never thought that about myself, and we all are, of course. We do have the power of resilience within us, and we don't think back to times we've overcome struggles and tough times. But when we left, like we felt there was a burden and an expectation, so it was almost like, this is going to work no matter what, and it was, oh my God, Hail Mary, I hope everything works out, and that's a generational thing too. My parents are in their 80s. But emigration is tough. It can be a great adventure too, though. People think it's a sad time. It's not. You're going living your life. The world is smaller. It's not like it was back in the 60s or 70s. But I have to continue to work on that stuff too, in my situations in my corporate life, reframe things. But in a personal life, there was like, yeah, this has got to work, So then when we made a decision to move back, which we did temporarily, I guess when we went again, people were saying, you're mad, it didn't work the first time, you're too old now, and I was like, oh, no, not at all. I mean, if anything, we're going to go again, not to prove something, but because we don't want to regret things later in life.
I loved that. And you know what, there's a lot of learnings to take, but what I loved the most from that whole book, Andrew, is the fact that you were so vulnerable, in that you moved back to Ireland because it didn't work out. And you know what, you said, I'm going to go back. You moved back to Ireland, got your jobs. You went working for another brand, Musgraves, and your wife got back into the job that she had previously. And reading that, I was going, wow. And then to actually have the gumption and to have the courage, I would say, because it's really courageous to actually get up and go back to the States again, having moved home, said it didn't work out. But then on reflection, going, do you know what? I don't think we gave it our all. And I think that, you know what, if we gave it our all and we moved back to Ireland, then because it didn't work out with relocating to the States, then okay, I'd be able to live with that. But you know what? We didn't give it our all. I'm not really happy with how we can do better, and why not give it another shot? And I just think that is so applicable to so many areas of our life, that I think there is a little bit of shame, I think, sometimes, that, if something doesn't work out and we walk away, and it could be anything, Andrew. It could be a deal, it could be a relationship, it could be something, in any area of our life, that there was this kind of shame that we're going back to it again. And I think, there's so much strength and power within going back to that again, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently, and going in with that mindset. So kind of talk me through that, because I just think that's something that, and I suppose I talk to a lot of people and I do a lot of coaching, and I think there's so much courage in that, in going back and doing that. Talk me through that, I suppose. Kind of, you did talk in the book how you did get a little bit depressed. You were kind of forgetting to meet friends, and you'd never done that before. And how you'd a love for golf, and that definitely sings through in the book. The golfing is a love of yours. And that you kind of stopped doing that, and doing things you enjoyed doing, and feeling fulfilled, because you had this piece of regret inside you because it hadn't worked out in the States and you were back in Ireland. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it was like a retreat, not just moving back from America to Ireland, but it was like I retreated from what I felt was the normal things that I did. Yeah, I was depressed, I could say I was down, depressed. Yeah, I was, when you stop playing your usual activities, or you stop hanging around with your mates that you've known for years, I felt that I had to explain everything.
Yeah.
And then, of course, what I found tough was people not asking questions, because then, they don't want it, they're gonna don't know what to say either. Much prefer someone to meet it head on and say, oh, what happened, or talk about things, whatever. But I think that, it's for everybody, be it business or a personal change in life, you have to kind of go back to why you wanted to move in the first place. You got to remember that, or make a change in a career, move house, move jobs, start a relationship or end a relationship, hopefully not ending too many of them. And, go back to your values, so for me, it was adventure. And my wife, Jane, too, of course. So she's in this very much too, so she's courageous, but we were moving for adventure, and we thought that it was the right thing for us. And as you said, there was no social or economic circumstance making us move. It was something that we hadn't done a lot of traveling. We had this opportunity, so why not go for it? And I think that as time has gone on, the culture and the environment I'm in now, although Ireland is always home, everywhere I go, it's infectious. It's, what if we try this, Andrew? What if we were to do this, rather than why didn't we think of doing this? So like, it's almost like playing out scenarios. What if I was to become a coach? What if I was to start a podcast? What would that do for me? And why would I be doing it? And what do I want it to stand for? So I mean, we do look, life is short. We all say that, of course. And I had a health scare, as a teenager. So I'm sure that shaped my life at some stage. However, that scene in the book of us coming back and landing in Shannon, we knew straight away that it was a little bit of a regret. And then, we went back to normal and jobs and all the things that everybody needs and wants. And we were watching the Late Show on the Friday night, which is fine. But it was, I don't think we gave ourselves the best chance. So we went back again, packed the bags, did everything again, and we're here now 12 years later. And we do go back to Ireland every year for a couple of weeks holiday, and we get people to visit too. But, life is still an ongoing journey, I mean, now we're parents here, so that's new in America. So that's a change, an adjustment. So now we have to remember, what's right for us, and define our family values. And maybe America is the right place or maybe it's not. We don't know, we're just taking it day by day, week by week. But the small community thing is great, but it's when you step out of yourself a little bit, and why shouldn't you aspire to chase your own dreams, whatever they are? I mean, I'm not going to judge somebody to say that that's crazy or not crazy. You get a couple of chances at doing these things, so we should all go for them. But the big thing was, then you need to surround people to go on a journey with you. So Jane and I never spoke to anyone. We could have leaned on some Irish people living in San Diego, an expat community. And we didn't. It was very strange. We retreated, and it was like, we should have figured this out a bit better, and too hard on each other. But equally, we should have given each other a kick in the butt and said, come on, let's stick this out. And then when we came back the second time, we had an agreement. We said, look, if one of us is not getting on well, then we give it 6 more months, and then see where we're at. And it's worked beautifully for both of us, albeit ups and downs, but that's life for everybody. But anyone listening, if you have something that you want to go after and chase, or you want to pivot your career, or you're starting out of college, or maybe you're later in life, you want to write a book, why not? Why would you not go and do these things and have confidence that it'll work out? What's the worst that can happen? You go to start to write a book, you don't finish it, you'll get there eventually. You change job, you can always change again. I know it's tough economically and all that good stuff, but you have one life. You have to go after everything you want to do and enjoy it and embrace it as best you can. And when you have downs, surround people. When you have tough times, and talk about them. And when you have ups, celebrate. Don't expect to launch a podcast. Give yourself a pat on the back. Don't write a book without celebrating when it comes out, or whatever it is, you have to celebrate.
Yeah. I suppose you talked there about, I suppose your kind of your why
Mm.
for being there is important, Andrew. And in the book, you mentioned that you'd visited the States, you visited San Diego prior to moving over there. The weather was a massive pull, obviously, and in fact could golf more with the weather being really good. And obviously living somewhere different. But has that why changed, or is that why, has it stayed the same, or has it evolved over time?
I would say it's constantly evolving. I'm very lucky. I get to do some traveling. Every
Yeah,
day I meet somebody new.
yeah,
Every day I meet some new culture, diversity. I try
yeah,
new food. The sense of adventure is still here.
yeah,
And again, but it is a little different now. We're parents, so now we're settling into schooling and all that good stuff too. So that's can be challenging, but equally enjoyable. But no, absolutely not. No, I like we still very young, like we're mid 40s, but we feel like, so here's the best way I can sum it up. So I lived in Ireland for 33 years and I lived in America for 12 years. So I'm always going to lean back to the familiar, which is always Ireland, of course. But
yeah,
it's like this is like a part two of a life, 12 years
yeah,
and discovering things every day and asking questions. I mean, I work in sales, so I ask a lot of questions, but I never can ask questions when I meet people out in the street because you kind of knew everyone in Cork. But now,
yeah,
hey, tell me more about that, and do a lot of listening. And Americans are very open,
yeah.
and that's something that. But yeah, no, it's great. Still sense of adventure. Still so many things to do. Um, every day is a blessing. Yeah, absolutely love it.
Love it, adventure, and I'm hearing that word said a few
Yeah.
times. So it's that sense of adventure. It's really really nice to hear it. Um, I suppose, and I have the book here, and because I love to quote things that are said. I'm one of those people that is big into that. I suppose there was something here that stood out to me in the book when I was reading it. Um, and it was around your not getting attached to outcomes.
Mm,
I suppose, and I suppose that's really prevalent when we look at, and I love the story you talked about, and I suppose I've done a little bit of mentoring with startups, and you talked about a startup and that it was going really well, and then they just ran out of money for whatever reason, and you'd lost that position, and then they turned out the business didn't take off in the end, and
mm,
they weren't patient enough, and hadn't given it, I suppose, a proper time that it needed, hadn't really been probably strategic in planning,
mm,
I suppose the business needs in order to drive it forward. But I suppose, because you've a couple of scenarios there in the book where you talked about outcomes and they didn't really get you what it was you needed. What was it kind of, I suppose, one of the biggest learnings you've taken from your professional career where you may be focused on the outcomes a little bit more, that maybe you learned that the outcome wasn't really, I suppose, the result that you needed. It was more so the journey that you needed in that particular company you worked for.
yeah, good one. So I think that definitely is slow and steady wins the race. If everyone's kind of rushing towards an outcome or getting to where we all think we want to get to, you're going to lose sight of things along the way. And in that particular instance, yeah, I mean, slow and steady and patience and persistence would have been better off. It was a finance problem that can happen. But equally, I think that you got to be in it for the long haul, and enjoy the journey. I think that we're all looking for the final destination. But I guess the outcome of that has taught me to be a little bit more prudent about, who I get involved with. So there's a learning for me there too. I mean, everybody says we have a great culture, we have the best, tasting alcohol liquid, we're well financed, so now I ask more questions about it. Well, how are you financed, and so on and so forth. So that's a learning for me. But slow and steady wins the race. Sales business is fast and furious, but it's slow and steady. It always has been and always will be. You got to be patient, you got to stay the course, you got to learn to pivot, you got to be open and honest to feedback. You got to accept if things aren't going well. That's cool. That's where we're at, and then do an inventory of what you can do to do better and move forward. So I've certainly learned a lot along the way in my 23 years of sales.
Yeah, it was really interesting because I was reading in the book, and you know, you spoke about how you worked in a franchise
Mm,
business in Ireland, and that was a very hands-on role, and you really got to see it, I suppose, from an implementation level within the retail side of things, and also from, you know, the buy-in end and all of that, and you're really involved in that whole process. And then you went on to work in a huge, I think it was Heineken, and one of the
hmm
larger scale businesses. And obviously the way we do business over here is different. I've worked for French companies and I've worked for Dutch brands. Okay, so I know the Irish way is a little bit different. Okay, and that takes a little bit getting used to, you know. So, and I think in the book you touched on this a little bit, and I think for anyone that's listening, you know, and that has worked maybe or bought as a consumer in an American store versus buying as a consumer in an Irish store, it's very much a different experience service wise. Okay. So I suppose the question is, because I was reading about, you know, your relationship building skills and sales, obviously, you know, slow and steady, we get to know the person, and
hmm
then we bring in the business side of it. Did you find that a hard adjustment over in America? Because there seems to be more, and you touched on this, the direct approach, and
mm.
maybe the softly approach, the let's get to know John there. You know, he knows Mary, and you know, this kind of whole thing that happens in Ireland because it's smaller. How did you adjust to that? Because it must have been a bit of a shock in a way.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely had to kind of fit in. Like, it's no matter where you go in any country, you know, there is an element of fitting in with whatever the culture is, without losing sight of who you are and your own personality and your values, which we spoke about before. But yeah, no, I needed to get to the point straight away in a lot of meetings, you know, and people are busy, but we're all busy, aren't we? But we all have only 24 hours in the day anyway, you know. But I could quickly see that a lot of people didn't know a lot about each other, people who'd been working with each other for 20 plus years, which would be totally alien in Ireland. You know, when you see the same people every day, that you wouldn't know too much about them. So after a while, I was able to bring in my own personality, the Irishness, of course, the storytelling and the personable nature, which all Irish people have. And people really liked that. It was authentic. You know, if you remembered, you know, daughter's communion or just basic stuff. And it wasn't, you know, genuinely not doing it from a salesy point of view. I wanted to get to know people. So what do? You ask questions, you know, any vacation coming up. It's always a tough question for Americans because they don't take vacation and they kind of look at you, oh, why would I go on vacation? And then they start talking about where they'd love to go on their bucket list. But after a while, then I got the right blend, you know. So, but I think that's more understanding your customers too, you know. So some are, you know, be brief and be gone, give me the facts, the data, and go away. Other people want to talk about sport all day long. But it is tricky, you know. You're in the meeting and you kind of, you can see body language from people. They want you to move on or so on and so forth. So yeah, you have to adapt. I mean, the great thing is we all speak English here. I mean, I don't know how people move to other countries. In fairness, France, you know, I know that English is well spoken, or Japan or Asia, and that's got to be very difficult too, you know. But you have to fit in, you know. You got to get with whatever the ethics is, but then you must bring out your own personality, okay? And you must be authentic to yourself. Don't change for anyone, but try and blend it in, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I read one of your stories. It was really interesting. You were in a boardroom,
Mm,
and things didn't go to plan at all. And someone had you given up a report and you hadn't delivered the report yet, and you would notice that by
yeah.
being kept on in that meeting by accident, that the reports were shared.
hmm
Talk me through that, because that's quite a tough situation to be in the workplace.
hmm
I suppose, how did you feel? How did you navigate that? Because it must have been a lot of emotion going through you, having seen someone take your work and say it was theirs, to then not actually respond or react to that.
Yeah. Well, the great thing is that having worked in sales in the corporate world for 22 years,
Yeah.
in one way, it wasn't kind of surprising. But when something like that happens to anyone or to me, it
Mm.
hasn't happened before. But people taking credit, I mean, I'd always give credit to other people that were involved in a project with me. Well, why wouldn't you? But that's okay. That's everyone. Everyone is different. But that particular meeting, yeah, it was a big board meeting, and
Mm.
you know, I kind of knew something was up a couple of days beforehand. It was there was just a funny environment. But you know, shout out to all the board members. They asked me to stay in the room because the documents had been shared the previous day, so therefore they had got sight of them. And I guess that is the pivotal moment, because had I left the boardroom, the person who was presenting was going to be speaking about me, claiming my work was their work, even though it's team effort, but I was the point person, and also making recommendations and making changes to my career and my position. So when that started happening, you know, you could see definitely the person presenting knew that, uh-oh, she's, in fairness, she just ran with her script, and the board members backed me up, and she left the business quite quickly after that, you know. So they supported me. I got the vote of confidence. However, like, I do think what would have happened had I left the room and walked in, not knowing really what was happening, and I would have been going through my presentation, and then for however it worked out, I mean, that could have been personally very traumatic. You know, I would have had to really draw on my experience of saying it's not me, it's someone else's issue. But I was fuming, to be honest. You know, I was even though I kept my composure in the meeting and rebuked all the things that were incorrect, because you have to stand on your own 2 feet. Why would you cower away from somebody when it's not factual? So it was an interesting one. Again, another learning for me. There you go. That's life, you know.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think you've mentioned a few times your values and staying true to them, but also having a voice. I think you mentioned that, having a voice in that meeting to be able to say that to those people. And it sounded like reading the rest of it, it really worked out well, because you stood up for yourself in a really well professional way that later won the buy-in from those other board members.
Yeah, no, I definitely, like, I mean, look, I say there's times in life when you sink or swim, and sometimes you might choose to sink and say, you know, I'll let this go. It's not a big deal, you know, but this was major, you know, so you swim and you speak up. And look, I learned from a great manager in Heineken in Cork. He taught me so much that, you know, he probably gave me the confidence back then when I was a young man, and now later in life. Yeah, I mean, if you can back things up factually, why wouldn't you stand up and rebuke any negative things, you know? So anybody listening here, you know, you have to have your own voice, find your own voice, and trust yourself, and have your own values. For me, it's respect and integrity. That can mean different things to different people, but there was a lack of respect and a lack of integrity, and I absolutely won't stand for that, you know. So, you know,
Yeah.
We move on from it.
Is it quite different building those relationships? I think you touched on in the book, it's how you do business over there is quite different to over here. And I think you mentioned that you bring people out for golfing trips, and you take them, you know, away, and it's quite different to how it's done over here in Ireland. Talk me through that. So, like, it just sounds amazing, to be honest with you. But I suppose in kind of in that format, is it needed because there isn't that personable approach normally? So in order to get to that point over there, you need to take them out. Is that kind of why that happens, maybe? Or
yeah, no, you've hit the nail on the head. Like, this is a great chance to spend 5 hours on a golf course with someone. It's something that I love to do, and it's something that generally all my customers and distributors do anyway, and they want to get out of the office. And you know, there's definitely a big difference between here and Ireland. I think that if the Oireachtas committee were investigating some American invoices like RTE, they'd definitely be shut down a long time ago. But everything is accounted for, of course. But there isn't the problem spending $10,000, you know, on a day of golf for two, three good customers. It's a bigger picture plan. We're talking about business over the next 2 years. And generally, when I play golf with all these folks, I'm quite a good golfer, so obviously I'll help them with their games. But we won't talk business. This is the weird thing about it. I mean, we're just, you know, getting to know each other, having fun. You really do see a person's character on a golf course, how they behave, you know, how they interact when they hit a bad shot, a good shot, you know, and they're all so grateful to get out for 4 or 5 hours. And of course, we'll all probably, you know, follow up a couple of days later after the game of golf. Hey, you know, by the way, we've got a big distribution drive coming up next month. You know, can we execute at 90% or whatever we're doing? And it's all that relationship building. It's deepening the relationships. And I've seen other people go out in the golf course, and on the first tee, like a coworker of mine be straight in there. So, like, you know, what's happening with sales? Why aren't you guys delivering for us? And I'm like, relax, you know, slow and steady. Let's enjoy ourselves. And that's the personable nature then. And you separate yourself then from competition too. But in Ireland, yeah, we did some of that stuff too, but we all kind of knew each other. So in Ireland, I would never, you would dare not follow through for a customer in Ireland, because you see the person in SuperValu at the weekend, or you might see him at Mass on a Sunday, or be up at the GA pitch. So, that's a different type of selling too, So it's a different mix, but at the end of the day, if you're providing a good service and you're solving a problem for customers, everybody will do business with you. You just got to find your own style.
Yeah, I was there was and you literally, it was funny that you said there you always follow through, because I underlined this, and it's funny because it's something my own dad says and my own grandmother said, and I don't know if it's an Irish thing, if it's what, but you wrote here in the book, my father and mother instilled in me a good work ethic, not necessarily hard work, but to be conscientious, customer-centric and reliable. If you can't do something, say you can't do it. And if you say you'll do something, follow through. And there's been many times where I have had things happen and I said, oh, I can't. Did you say you do it for them, Louise? And I said, yeah. Well, you better hadn't do it then, hadn't you? And your arms and legs could be falling off, Andrew. But if you said you're going to do it in our house, by God, are you going to do it? So I read that and I literally underlined it. And if you say you'll do something, follow through. So that is something that I resonated with, and it's interesting because you said it there. And I think that is something that, regardless, we might do things sometimes for the first time and it mightn't be the best in the world because we're still learning, but you've done it, you kept your word. And I think that's something that will always come back from a professional perspective, and keeping your word from personal. I think it's really, really important. And it's really important to build those relationships that way. And I just loved that, even for someone to take that advice in from a business perspective, that, and I think you mentioned in the book, you under promise and over deliver. And, we'd always say that, we get the order out, we go, not sure, we'll try, and then we'll go, freaking better get it out, we'll surprise them and they might get it the day before, but you kind of, just in case there might be an issue with the logistics, you'll be like, oh, okay. So I totally get that from a business perspective. So I thought it was great. There was really good questions on the book here, and I thought that when you're working for a company, and you worked for a lot of companies, you've a lot of experience in the beverage sector side of things, and you're working for Mike's Hard Lemonade, and you shared something which I thought was really, really interesting for anyone that is in a new role or getting to build maybe the B2B side with maybe their clients or going into meetings. And what you mentioned here, which I thought was a really key learning point, was I set about to understand their business by asking the open questions. How do you look at your business and what gaps do you see? Brilliant question. What kinds of communication style do you prefer? What are key times during the year for your business? What suppliers are you doing good business with you and why? And what have you as a company not done well? What have we as a company been doing well that could further enhance? And I just thought they were really great questions, because they get to the point, they get to the problem, they get to the real nitty gritty. And I just thought that was a really, really interesting point that you touched on there within working for that brand. I suppose, when did you get to that point that those kind of, because you did mention further on that, you had little things happen, did you do a course? How did you learn that? Like, what came about you asking those great questions? Did you read a book that kind of, what, I need to be approaching this differently? How did you, I suppose, self-learn that skill? Because many of us take a long time to figure that out. And many of us might have our own business. We mightn't be around people to give us that feedback, Andrew. So how did you come about learning that?
combination of stuff really. Was one, being open to learning from other senior people in whatever profession you're in, people that have years of experience, to sit with them and talk to them and ask them, what's a really great customer call? What's a great way to uncover information? I've been very lucky to get great training courses at Heineken, but equally when I went back to college in the CIT, which is now the Munster Technological University in Cork, on the night courses I went there, we were talking a lot about questioning, role play, find a friend, find a buddy, sit down, talk in front of each other, ask them, how do you deliver? Are these good questions? Try and stay away from getting yes and no answers. Use them at the right times, how, what, when. They're the best questions. And then go practice it. Like I just said, find somebody to work with, and then trial and error. You got to go do it yourself. So like all these customers I meet, I get 30 minutes, and the next supplier's coming in, and the next supplier, and they're all saying the same thing pretty much, just in a different accent or a different way. But most people are very anxious. I got to get my information out. I got to use this PowerPoint slide. I got to make sure. No, you just got to ask questions and listen. And then your next meeting, the customer, you heard me. Andrew listened and heard. So there's a difference between listening and hearing. And then you make your presentation. So, Louise, you like to look at that data this way. You like to do this. Perfect. Here you go. And now you're getting in as a partner, not just seeing it as a transactional relationship. So anybody looking to improve their skills, find somebody, practice with them. Nowadays, go on plenty of YouTube videos on how to ask great questions, or buy a good book. Maybe the answers are in a book that's called How Did I Get Here? But yeah, no, look, practice, no matter what it is, and don't be afraid of making a fool of yourself.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and I think from talking to people, and even people that have service-based business or product-based businesses, that people don't buy in one interaction. Statistically, from business development managers could have up to 10 to 15 interactions before they close that sale. So it's like what you said, it's gathering. You're that investigator. You're going to put on your little investigator hat, and you're now going to find those clues to see what that customer really wants and what excites them, and makes them feel good. So I think it's a really important point to touch on, because I think some people do get really bogged down in, the transactional piece of it. And I think the humanistic side of it, I think, was lost a little bit in COVID, because I think in some places anyways, you couldn't use cash. It was card, and they didn't want to touch anyone, and I get that. It was a big, everyone was afraid to even, stand near someone. But I think it's funny how that has, it's gone, but it hasn't. In service-based industries, we're still a little bit standoffish, so I think it's about reconnecting again with people, like you said, and asking those questions, because you want to get to know the person behind the actual the sale, and people connect to that. Yeah. You have your little boy.
Yes.
God, it was very heartbreaking reading the last part of the book, with the miscarriages and all of that. And I think probably it's not a lot of men speak about it, from what I can see, Andrew. I think I think that they were bringing in leave days for in Ireland for men, and where they had a miscarriage with the mum and the dad. So it is something that we don't see spoken about. And it was nice that you spoke about that in the book, and you shared that kind of vulnerability and the from a male perspective, as well as, knowing it from a female perspective, was really, really nice to hear. You have your boy now, and it's wonderful. And I loved reading you stayed at home and you're around when he walked his first couple of steps, and you could feel that emotion when you got to that part of the book, where that was probably a really, really tough time for you guys to get through that, but to keep going, I suppose, Andrew, and to keep working through it, which I thought was unbelievable, because it's a lot of miscarriage to keep going and continuing on that. Reflecting back, is there anything that you would have done differently? Now, I know you talked about maybe slowing down a little bit. I think you said one of them, the doctor said to just work your way through it, which I thought was a bit, for God's sake, you know what I mean? I was kind of reading it going, are you for real? I wasn't happy reading that part, because I just thought it was it lacked compassion, I think, and definitely. But is there anything looking back on that where, you know, I suppose you've said, you know what, I kind of wish, anything you wish you'd done differently, I suppose, or you've learned from that experience, that you kept going? Did you go to therapy? Did anything kind of support you in that process, or how did you get through it?
So yeah, we had 4 miscarriages in 4 years, all in America, and each one totally different and but equally devastating, as much as it was great news when Jane found out she was pregnant. And we just never got past, the first trimester, even the night before the 12-week scan. But all went well, and our son Alfie was born. He's going to be 4 in a couple of weeks' time. So happy days. He's my hero. He's Jane's hero. But I think definitely, yeah, no, we didn't go to therapy. We definitely leaned on each other an awful lot, and we did throw ourselves into work, which, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, to be honest, because you start compensating, working long hours, distracting yourself. And I definitely think we probably should have involved more people. We were a little bit too stoic. First time, fair enough, you kind of keep it to yourself. Second time, third time, fourth time. But that could have been the Irishness in us too, a little bit, to not to share. And I suppose we were living abroad, so kind of in our own minds, we don't want to be worrying anybody back in Ireland. What can they do? But there is great comfort in talking about things, and we could have done a lot more of that too. Now, we did lean on each other an awful lot. There was plenty of times when we cried, and plenty of times we hugged, and plenty of times when we were frustrated with each other too, honestly, or short with each other, or whatever that term would be. But we kept hoping that things would work out. We looked at adoption and IVF, and we didn't have problems getting pregnant, but we're not citizens at that time, so we couldn't adopt anyway. So it all worked out well. However, we had kind of reconciled that if it wasn't to work out, that we'd have to find some other way of being parents, or we just have to accept it. And I think that there's a few stages in grief, and we were grieving, and we were both on different spectrums. It's not straight shot 1 to 5 or how many steps. But anybody going through anything, not necessarily miscarriage, like if you have a partner, or you have to speak. Hey, I'm not feeling well today. I want to talk about this. God Almighty, folks, we got to be a little bit vulnerable, because we all have feelings, we all have emotions, and it's better to get them out of your head if you can. And if you can't do that with your partner, find a therapist. Go speak. I mean, it doesn't have to be costly. Just access to services, so on and so forth. But again, you have to stay hopeful. Things will work out, and then you got to trust back yourself too, So it's worked out. But going back to what we were talking about with sales and all that kind of thing, people don't do things the first time around. Same as Alfie, I can't get him to eat broccoli, so I read something about you got to get a kid to try food 5 times before they like it, and now he likes broccoli. So we didn't give up on that, but it's there's always something that you can do different. And the book starts with a health scare, but ends on a great note with Alfie being born too, and it's a nice book, 219 pages, 23 chapters, 4 sections, and hopefully some experience that I can share with people. The book really is a legacy for my son Alfie. I want him to know where we came from, and all the royalties from the book go into his account, and that's it. That's his account, and whatever happens with that, the book will live forever. I won't live forever. Not sounding morbid, but that's a fact, And I'm 45 years of age. The first 45 has been interesting, so we'll see what the next 45 will be like. But I'm here to help anybody, talk to anybody, help people through things. My buddies have opened up to me about many different things. I've had females reaching out to me about their stories of miscarriage and other things, and people are talking, and resilience is within all of us. We said at the top of the conversation, we do have the power to overcome things. So you can figure it out yourself, or you can involve people. But if you trust yourself and you back yourself, you know when the right time is to involve people. And it's you'll get a lot out of it by talking about it and clearing the decks, and go and have some fun then too. There's nothing that can't be overcome. I mean, just find a way, communicate. And good stuff will happen, I promise.
I love it. And how did I get here? # keep going. You know what I mean? Because that's what keeps coming up in each one of your stories, is just this keep going. And we talk about resilience sometimes in coaching, like a bouncy ball, and the ball bounces back. And I think it's when we bounce back that bounce back ability. When we do get that knockback, how do we bounce back again? It's how long we stay back there to how long we come back into it, and then how we move forward from that. So I just thought it was fantastic. Really, really great stories in it. I think from a personal or a professional perspective, people will relate. I've a good few of them highlighted there, which I'm going to pop a couple of them, just the key ones underneath, and the book as well. I'll have a link for that for anyone underneath as well. It's been really, really great chatting with you, Andrew. If people want to reach out to you, where would you like them to reach out to you on? Is it LinkedIn? Is it what's platform are you on mostly, or where would you like?
Yeah, so you find me on LinkedIn, Andrew Fitzgerald. I have my title there as global beverage expert and international best-selling author, which is a new title since February. Amazing. And then my website is www.andrewfitzgeraldauthor.com. You can buy the book there. You'll get a signed copy if you buy it through there. But if you want to bundle the book with other items you order from Amazon, and let's try and support some independent businesses. So call into any independent bookstore and ask them for How Did I Get Here by Andrew Fitzgerald, and they can order it. So we don't have worldwide distribution. So I hope that everybody enjoys it and gets something out of it. If they like it, fantastic. And if it's not for them, please just pass it on to someone else. That's all.
Thank you so much, Andrew. It has been a delight to have you on. I really appreciate your time. Please check Andrew out. He's absolutely amazing. The book, again, How Did I Get Here? Really great, all about resilience. There's some amazing stories there. So check it out. There'll be links underneath. And as Andrew said, support local if you can. Go into those local stores and order it there. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Great. Thanks, Louise. Take care.